Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Felicity Ezewike. Tanzania is just weeks away from its general election, a moment when politics, scrutiny, and public debate ought to be at full throttle. Instead, many Tanzanians are faced with restricted access to social media, increased online policing, and signals that the government may be preparing to control the digital narratives more tightly than ever. Already, the social media platform X has been blocked inside the country. Government officials say it was needed after hackers posted pornographic content and false statements from state accounts. Yet critics argue it is part of a broader pattern to clamp down on decent media and digital freedoms as the electoral season intensifies. Now, other signs deepen concerns: the tightened rules over online content, police mandate recently from the minister to patrol the internet for disinformation and disruption, and ever sharper laws that in past instances have punished government critics. All of these builds on a legal framework that has been expanding since 2015. And the timing mirrors similar moves before the 2020 elections. Meanwhile, misinformation and disinformation are flooding the digital space. At stake, analysts say, it's not just who wins the vote in October, but whether Tanzanians can freely debate, organize, fact-check, and even expose abuses and hold leaders accountable. To discuss what's at stake and how things can change, I have joining me Dr. Leah Mwankunle, lecturer and course leader, University of Westminster School of Media and Communication. Also joining is Lucy Ezemba, Senior Program Manager, Policy Lab Africa. Ladies, thank you very much for joining us. Dr. Mwankunle, I hope I got that right. From your observation, how pervasive would you say the social media clampdown or blockade, as some would describe it, is in Tanzania today?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me in the show. Well, we have had some issues related to social media for a while. Especially during general elections, that's when you can really feel it. So as you correctly said, it happened in 2020 when we had general elections. And now the elections are next month in October. And so there have been instances where we have seen that social media is being controlled by the government. Recently, the government has imposed a blanket ban on X, also known as Twitter. And yes, this was after some official Twitter accounts were hacked, including the Tanzanian police's account. And that happened a month ago, more than a month ago, but the block still remains in place. People cannot access Twitter. Some of them do access it through VPNs, but at the same time, the use of VPN in Tanzania is illegal, and you could be arrested from that. So yeah, it's been an issue where people are communicating, are finding ways to communicate. They're using other means such as Threads and Facebook, but there is worry all over. Just recently, 2 weeks ago, the government suspended the license of Jamii Forums, which is actually the most prominent social media platform in the country. So again, the clampdowns are there.
Yeah. This use of VPN, already said to be illegal, isn't that also stopping people from accessing the internet and even posting stuff? Because if you do, the minister has already directed the police to, police and patrol the internet space. Is it possible that something you post online could be used to target, arrest you, and perhaps take you to court?
Well, the use of VPN is illegal. I haven't yet heard anyone to be arrested from using VPN because, you have to go on someone's phone or something like that to be able to access that. However, if you do post something that, you know, the government might not like and things like that, yes, you can be arrested. And people have been arrested before using the Cybercrimes Act of 2015. They have been arrested for criticizing the government, for criticizing the president at that time. Some people just, posted some things on Facebook or on WhatsApp groups, and then they were arrested for that. And, some of them in prison, some of them fined.
I mean, quite a sad narrative for what's going on in the media space there. Lucy, let me come to you and just get your perspective on what has changed since previous election. Is this a new level of digital control or an upgrading of what has been described as pervasive control and, the tightening and clamping down on freedom of expression?
Very much. So we see this pattern all the time, where towards election, African government tend to shut down the internet with any excuse. So we've seen it in Nigeria. Last year, it was like a whole thing. So it's either before, during, or after. It was like a whole thing in Mozambique. So this is just like a pattern. It's like it keeps getting worse, and this affects the digital space. I mean, it's supposed to be a democracy where everybody is free to give your own opinion. And, X, for example, it's like one of the major places there's like political activism where everybody can give. There's lack of misinformation. But then these are like the first platform that are being shut down. So citizens don't get information. Citizens don't get anywhere to talk about anything. So these are consistent problems we keep seeing in African countries towards election. How the internets are being shut down. It's not getting any better. It's getting worse all the time. I mean, this is 2025. We're supposed to be going a bit better, not dragging back to the pattern we've always seen over the years.
Doc, you highlighted earlier that the government cited cyber attacks and misuse of the platform, and then the posting on the police platform as some of the justification for the clampdown on social media. There are speculation and argument that is it possible, considering the history of how government manages the internet space in the country, that these were intentional acts aimed to use the law to clamp down on the people? Are these credible explanations? Are these acceptable explanations to the Tanzanian people for the reasons the government is clamping down on the internet?
Well, when Twitter was banned over a month ago, what happened was that some official accounts were hacked. They were really hacked, and they did post some pictures of the president, and some actually posted messages saying that the president was dead. When it wasn't true. And when that happened, of course, the government moved into, blocking Twitter, X, sorry, it's called X now, and, issuing explanation about that. But then that has been over a month ago, and that had, we are not sure if the hackers were within the country or outside the country. There were some issues that were going on that time where some activists from our neighboring East African countries were arrested and, sent back to their countries. And so people actually associated it to that, like, did the hackers come from the neighboring East African countries or things like that? But then that was more than a month ago, and we are heading towards elections. And that's when people are questioning that if that had happened and, it's already been resolved, why isn't the ban lifted? Okay. Because, as I say, the elections are exactly a month away. How do...
Doc, are you still with us? I think the network has interrupted. So let's just switch to Lucy and ask about the laws itself, the legal powers What legal powers does the Tanzanian Communication Regulatory Authority have under the Electronic and Postal Communications Act or Cybercrimes Act to restrict online platforms? How aware are the people of these powers?
So, with the cybercrime.
Okay, do we have the doctor back? If we do, conclude your thought, and then Lucy, you take up the question after she's done.
It's another law, and it's called the Electronic Postal and Communication Act. So regulation. So these started in 2018, and they have been, updated, and now we have a 2025 law. And so people are usually arrested through the cybercrimes law. But at the same time, the platforms themselves, they are regulated by that regulation. And the overseer of that regulation is the Tanzania Communications Regulatory Authority. So most people don't really know. And even the people who used to be arrested in the past, they were like, oh, I just posted something like the president doesn't know what he or she is doing. And that makes me, a criminal. And so they really don't know. And so a more interpretation of the laws is required, because I did some research a while back about specifically that Cybercrimes Act. If you insult the president, for example, it's a crime. But you need to understand what exactly is an insult, because we have seen that people who criticize are the ones who are arrested. Now, what's the difference between an insult and a criticism? That's what is confusing, because sometimes you might feel that, it is your responsibility as a citizen to criticize, but then in fact, they interpret it as insulting, and then you get arrested. And so it's a bit confusing for people, even for me.
I guess so. So let's just jump from that question, Lucy. I want to ask you something else. I mean, we know there is a law. We know that there is censorship, and understanding it might not really answer some of the questions we have, because there are still doubts as to the intention behind these laws. But talk to us about how media outlets are responding. Are they self-censoring, going underground, or shifting to off-grid methods? You did mention, the doctor mentioned the license of Jamil forums were suspended. I think that's for about 90 days. How are the others doing?
Well, because of the sections in the Cybercrime Act, like the doctor mentioned, the different sections like how vague that can be. That can lead to that can lead to restriction of freedom of speech. So different media outlets are restricted. Nobody's free to give information. Nobody's free to, you do not know what is considered false by the government. You don't know the information or what you're trying to say, the criticism, the opposition you're trying to put out there, if they will term it as false, because only the government have their own explanation of what's the false information in the section, the crime, and I think that's section 16 of the Cybercrime Act law. So this can lead to very restricted information. This can lead to media outlet not putting out so many information. For example, how the Jimmy forums were restricted simply because they put out some information and the Tanzanian government considered it as false information and criticizing the government. So even when you're criticizing the government, I mean, it's a democracy, the government is supposed to be open to criticism. Even when you're criticizing the government, it can be termed as false because of how big the sections of the Cybercrime Act law is. And a whole platform can be shut down, your forum can be shut down, and all these things hinder freedom of speech.
All right, Doug, let's see if we can move towards more of solution. How much leverage do you think civil organizations have to challenge and push back in courts, or put public pressure to ensure that people are not unjustly punished for using social media?
Tried. They really have tried in the past, but you know, we live in a world where the government is powerful. I mean, the government in Tanzania is really powerful. The constitution has given the person in power a really great powers, to the point that when the activists try to go to court, it's not easy. It hasn't been easy for them. There was a time when the previous government had banned for instance, any political activities in the country, saying that the politicians should just, you know, wait for the following elections. At the same time, the ruling party continues to conduct its political activities. Activists have made a lot of noise about these things, but it just ends there. You know, they condemn, they complain, and things like that, but it just ends there. And at the same time, sometimes they do win cases. I remember an instance where the Media Council of Tanzania, for instance, it opened a case at I think it was the East African Court. And they won the case, and it was against some provisions that were in the media laws. And the court said that this law should be changed, you know, those provisions should be removed. But the government doesn't listen. The court has said that they should do it, but they didn't do anything. And so at the end of the day, people feel, what's the point? You go to court, you win the case. The government is asked by the courts to make some changes. It doesn't make some changes, and there's nothing you can do about that.
Quite unfortunate, really. I want to stay with you with this question, because I think you brought it up, the VPN that people are using to access the internet as a solution ahead of the elections. How accessible is this VPN for people, especially in the rural community? And is it something that civil society are encouraging and pushing for Tanzanians to use so that they can still have their voices?
Civil society cannot say openly, please use VPN. That would be a crime now, because the use of VPN is illegal. But, you know, under the carpet, people know about this. Now, in terms of access, of course, that would be people who live in the cities, the urban areas. Those are the ones that know. And they share some links, you know, on WhatsApp groups and things like that. Like, hey, there's this VPN that you could use. When you're talking about the rural areas, with or without VPN, the internet isn't that accessible because, you know, of the kind of infrastructure that we have, because it goes with so many things, you know, electricity, the internet itself, the service providers, they charge a lot of money to access the internet. And so you find people switching off, you know, internet on their phones and maybe opening it for an hour so that they could see what's going on. So not quite for people who are in the rural areas, but people who are in cities and big towns, that's accessible to them.
Lucy, talk to us about how this clampdown is impacting on election information, sharing of information. I mean, people need to know who they're voting for, why they should be voting, and all of that. Is this clampdown impacting that awareness being created?
Of course, because, I mean, if you don't have, you want to know who you're voting for, you want to get access to information, you want to understand what is going on now, especially, I mean, the election is tomorrow, election is October, tomorrow is literally the 1st of October. This shuts down, this clamps down and limiting that, so limiting access to information. That's the very thing. And I mean, a very not well-informed citizen cannot participate fully in electoral votes. You would want to have enough information. This clamps down on, like X, like I mentioned earlier. X is one of the platforms where you can have political activism, you can have international visibilities. But when it's being shut down, all these things are being limited. You do not have access to get information. You don't have access to do much things. So these clampdowns are really, really affecting the election.
I'll stay with you. According to fact checkers, most false election claims target opposition voices. Could you make an inference on what this says about the political design ahead of the election? That's just in weeks.
Sorry, can you come again?
Yeah, Lucy, I'm staying with you with that question. I'm just referencing some fact check that was done, and that says most false election claims target opposition voices. I'm asking what inference you can make about the political design with this kind of behavior and how it will impact or play out in the elections that we expect in a couple of weeks.
When there's that's why these shutdowns happen. When there's no like open communication, oppositions can come up, the government keep interfering and everything. So these are the shutdowns. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, it has happened severally in different African countries. So these are the things that keep happening where you don't, even if it's during after election, the internet that is being shut down, the government interferes and everything. So this clampdown keep happening.
All right, Doc, what are the main risks to Tanzania's democratic legitimacy if social media remains controlled during elections, as we see happen in Tanzania?
What are the main what? Sorry.
I'm asking what are the main risks to Tanzania's democratic legitimacy?
Okay, so when you control social media and when you ban the digital space like that, the risk is people don't get the information, as they would have loved to. It is true that right now, because the campaigns started since this month and will be ongoing until the elections on the 29th of October, that the politicians are holding rallies all over the country. And I don't think there are any problems with that. But not everybody goes to rallies. And most people, especially those who live in cities, they rely mostly on social media because they don't attend rallies. They have other things to do. The rallies are either far away or during hours where they cannot attend them. And so, yes, they depend on social media. And the risks are they won't really get the information that they need to get. When you want to vote for someone, for a party or a person, you want to hear their policies. Now, how can you know about the policies if you depend on the digital space, but then it's being controlled? So that's one of the risks. Another risk is that normalizing bans is not a good thing, because at the end of the day, people will be expecting it and thinking that it's a normal thing. They banned Twitter, they suspended Jamii forums. If it happens again to another platform, it will be like, yeah, same old, same old. And normalizing something that is not okay, that is a big, big disadvantage, because it means people would be expecting that and they'll be like, yeah, that's our life. So yeah, doesn't matter. We'll just wait for the next elections.
Okay, I would reference Lucy, but I understand we have a bit of an issue with her connection. As soon as she comes back, we will go to her. But stay with you, Doc. What role should regional bodies like the EAC, AU, or international observers play in pressuring Tanzania to open its digital space, not just during the election, but allow that as a reflection of the democracy in the country?
I mean, if regional bodies could be more involved, that would have been good. The issue is we have heard instances where people say regional bodies, they don't really have teeth, so they can condemn. Okay, but then you condemn, and then what next? What if the government decides, okay, they've condemned, let them talk, and then, let's just go on with our lives. So Tanzania, for instance, is in the EAC. Apart from the EAC, we're also members of SADC because we're also in the South. Okay, we're in the African Union at the same time, and the UN and all of those. I haven't really heard anything from these regional bodies, and I don't want to get into politics, but then you try to look at the member countries and you try to look at their own actions. It's like they cannot speak about what's happening because it happens in their countries as well, or they'll also be facing general elections soon and they might be doing the same thing. But yes, we wish that they could do more because at the moment, we're not really seeing or hearing anything.
Given all discussed so far, do you believe that Tanzanians will still be able to make an informed choice in October? And will this digital squeeze, so to speak, have altered the electoral playing field significantly?
So will they be able to make informed decision? Maybe.
Maybe, but how will that happen if information sources are limited, conventional media probably controlled? Will it be a level playing ground enough for them to make informed decisions?
I think the government would, so now I cannot speak for the government. I know that the government would argue that, campaigns have started and everyone is campaigning. Okay. In terms of the digital space, the government would argue that if there's a ban, even the ruling party, CCM, is being affected by the ban. And so that's for everyone and not just for the opposition parties. There are other means of getting information, but you are right to talk about the digital space being controlled. Will there be a level playing field? Well, that's really hard to say because it affects both the ruling party and the opposition. It's not like the ruling party can post anything and the opposition cannot. The ruling party itself has, gone to Threads. Some of the opposition are also on Threads and Facebook. And another thing is that even though we are talking about the digital space, I believe it's more about the people, the conversations that the people have, and not really about the parties, because some of these parties that we have, they don't even have a digital presence, but the people are the ones who usually have discussions and things like that. And so maybe because of that, then it's not quite fair because when do they discuss? Where? What means would they use? Which digital space can they use if it's being controlled?
I mean, so much to digest. But before we drop this conversation, I'd like you to speak to the Tanzanian people as they prepare for the election with the social media ban. What advice would you give so that they can make the most of what is on the ground?
I mean, the advice that I could give the Tanzanian people is maybe if they can, they should try to attend the rallies. We still do have the mainstream media. Okay, newspapers, there are some newspapers that are really good, like the newspapers from Wananchi Communications, who make sure that they cover the rallies of all parties. If they could engage in making sure that they read such newspapers, I mean, they usually publish the party manifestos, they interview some of the contenders and things like that, that would be a really good idea to do. If they can access some of the party's websites, because you can access websites, if they can, just join some of the main parties' other social media pages, like on Facebook and on Threads. We do have some, for example, the ruling party itself, CCM, and you also have other parties like ACT Wazalendo, where they try to be active on social media. That would be good. But the option that we could use right now is probably with the mainstream media,
I guess. Thank you very much, Dr. Leah Mwanyekule, lecturer and course leader, University of Westminster. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.